Well, one cool thing you told me was that there was a country music station in Newark that you listened to when you were 5 years old.
At 5 and 4, and a little, yeah. And I am reasonably sure that the call letters were WAAT. Those were the call letters of what, at the time, and I'm talking early 1950s, Channel 13, when we only had half a dozen regular channels, and it was a commercial channel. But it was a country music station, and being a very mechanical kid, I was the 4-year-old who took apart the alarm clock, put it back together, and it worked. I also, music was part of my life. My mom was a trained concert pianist, so it was there all the time. And I was blessed with a good ear. And so the two combined, what are you going to fool around with? How about that? There's this radio. I think I will fool with the dials. And you go across, and there's Hank Williams, there's Joe Stafford, there's everybody. And so it stuck.
But it's an interesting, the combination of your kind of skill in the physical world with the sort of the music that came out of it. Like, because you told me a story of wanting to learn how to play 5-string banjo.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you didn't have one.
Yeah, well, I had already played guitar.
Well, I'll just say that for me, if I had wanted to play 5-string banjo and didn't have one, I wouldn't have. It would have stopped there.
And there are few things worse than listening to someone try to learn to play the 5-string banjo.
But leaving that aside.
Well, but that aside, I can't even. Well, I played guitar because probably via TV. As a younger kid in the early 50s, every red-blooded American boy, even those from Brooklyn, wanted to learn to do 3 things: ride a horse, play the guitar, and shoot a Colt pistol all at the same time. This is Roy Rogers and Gene Autry. And so I was into the country music. I mean, it's so weird. I still think it's weird, but I can remember very clearly hearing a news report on the radio, and it had to have been New Year's Day 1953, the day Hank Williams died. I was 4 and a half, and thinking to myself, boy, that's really too bad. I really like that guy's stuff. So, and I was already, who else at the time? Webb Pierce and Farron Young, or the country stars of the day. And so a lot of that stuff stuck, and I had to get a guitar. I had to kick and scream because my parents were strictly classical music. But I kicked and screamed. And I got a cheap little guitar. And that was when I was probably around 8. And other music filtered in. I think maybe around, well, the jazz came in around the ages of 12 or 13 via the radio, but that's another story. But the country music came in, I guess, in the early middle stages of the Great Folk Scare, the early 60s. Well, there were Flat and Scruggs records, and there were some shows here in town put on by Izzy Young and people of, the Stanley Brothers and people like that. The old-timey stuff, the New Lost City Ramblers, that got me going. And I definitely wanted to learn 5-string banjo, and my parents, of course, would not buy me one. I suppose I was 14 or so.
What was their attitude toward your interest in country music? Just
that crap? Although, see, my father, my dad served overseas in World War II. And he was thrown in with a lot of country boys. And so my dad somehow knew the Bob Wills stuff. He knew all the operas and all the Beethoven and the Chopin and the Vivaldi and all that, but he knew Bob Wills. Well, yeah, when you want to cast something in say, aluminum or cast iron, let's say an object like this, you have to make an example of it out of wood, and you will make a mold of that using what they call green sand. It looks like dirt, and you pack it around and you pull the thing out, and you can pour the molten. But the woodworking aspect of it is a fine skill with fine tools. We had to take pattern making. Well, I was like a pig in shit. This was like fabulous, and the teachers saw that I was really good with the hand tools. You're exempt. Sharpen up 400 chisels for me. You get an A for the course. And I said, look, I'm trying to make this banjo neck. Will you help me? Sure. There it was. And That wasn't even the beginning of it because,
Wait. Do you have that banjo?
no, it went away. It's a long story.
Well, let's see. How?
No.
Okay.
And I don't.
For your second appearance, we'll talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Next
At
time.
any rate, what that turned into was I needed a guitar. I couldn't find a good one. I found a wrecked Martin in a pawn shop. Instantly I did what I did with it, what I do with everything. I had to take it apart. I was fearless. There are no nuts and bolts and screws in a Martin guitar. It is glued together. Not a problem. Dismantle it. I was 15 and I learned a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
And I learned a lot from
Did that banjo,
guitar.
did it play good?
You bet it did, yeah. And I learned a lot from my mentor once I really got deep into it, a guy named Mark Silver. He had a store on 6th Avenue right near the IFC Theater there called Fretted Instruments. It was next door to the then location of the Folklore Center. And this was a real guitar store. Mark had come from Berkeley where he had worked in a store like that. And he was, I guess Mark is 7 or 8 years older than I am, but to me he was like an ancient guy. And he just, I would go there and I would look and say there was a Gibson mandolin. And he would point out one or two salient points about it and bang, I got it. So Mark really put me in directions and eventually my store was modeled after.
Just a shout out to my friend John Peden, who's here tonight, who has a great podcast called Sidetrack Liner Notes. And his most recent episode is a conversation with Steve Earle. And there's a little segment in there where John and Steve talk about you and about Steve's recent, there's even a picture of you a picture of him in your shop or something. So anyway, a shout out to you from Steve Earle, who seems like you guys go way back.
Well, it's interesting. I go back further with John Peden, who's a wonderful guy, a wonderful photographer. Pardon me. Outside of his passion for photography and all this, he's been tremendous in the guitar world because he loves it.
This show is dedicated to John Peden. I don't know if anybody noticed.
Steve Earle left Nashville after 30 years because he said too many Baptists. But really, Steve is a bit left politically. Nashville is not quite that direction. So he moved to New York and got an apartment on my block, literally around the corner from my store. And he's a guitar nut. And since he doesn't go into bars anymore, he needed someplace to hang out. And Steve was in my place 3 or 4 times a day. And we became good pals. We were both baseball fans. We went to ball games together. He also bought a lot of guitars from my place. And we became pals, and we're still pals.